Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
I have a craving for salt, baby. How about you?
I don't know. I don't think I want it right now.
Oh, one of my all-time favorite episodes. And actually, it's the first episode that was ever aired. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, hard to believe because we don't really consider this one typical Trek.
So, why did they air this episode first? And what was it like to open up a TV guide back in September of 1966 and be exposed to Star Trek? Well, we actually have an original TV guide, cover date September 3rd through 9th, has Zsa Zsa Gabor on the cover. As we open up to the Thursday night time slot, there is an advertisement that says, "Sneak a peek at NBC Week." 8:30 p.m. in color. Welcome aboard the United Spaceship Enterprise. Where it goes, no program has ever gone before. Sneak preview of Star Trek starring William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk. Earthman. Co-starring Leonard Nimoy as Science Officer Spock from the planet Vulcan. Also, there was a sneak preview of Tarzan and a sneak preview of The Hero. 3 fabulous sneak previews tonight.
Okay, so was that on September 8th?
It sure was.
You know, I also remember reading somewhere that September 8th was really not the first time they showed it. They actually showed it something like a week before, and there was something called, it was a sneak preview.
Go figure. Also, on ABC, they had an advanced premiere of Batman. It's an awesome week for television, huh?
Wow, really?
So here's the entry for Star Trek. 8:30 p.m. Thursday night, September 8th. Channel 6 and Channel 12. Adventure. Debut in color. This science fiction series centers on the crew of the USS United Spaceship Enterprise as they travel on an extended space patrol. Tonight, the Man Trap. The Enterprise stops on planet M113 for the annual medical checkup of archaeologists Bob and Nancy Carter. But Nancy doesn't seem to be herself.
Was it Carter or Crater?
Haha, I misread it. It's Crater. You know me, I screw up all these names.
Well, okay, so one thing about that, it did come on at 8:30, and it was an hour-long show. Because people today, and I've heard people say this like, oh, I can't believe they actually started the show at 8:30, because we're not used to that. For 1 hour shows, they always start on the O clock, like 8 or 9, but it actually came on at 8:30.
Yes. Yep, that's true.
We have the actual TV guide to show that is when it came on.
Okay, so let's see. Wait a second. That's a good trivia question. Let's see what came on before it. Okay, so right before it, let's start at 7 o'clock. Horse races, jamboree time, Arthur Smith, Littlest Hobo, a movie entitled I Was a Communist for the FBI, Ernest Tubb, Bobby Lord. For 7:30, there's Billy Graham Crusade, Tarzan, Wonderful World of Wheels, Batman, F Troop at 8 o'clock, and then at 8:30, yeah, sure enough, 8:30. This is what was going up against Star Trek at that time. My Three Sons, Billy Graham Crusade, Tammy Grimes, and that's it.
Oh, the 3 major networks.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, My Three Sons was a good show. I used to watch that in reruns.
Yes.
But see, that was a 30-minute show. But okay.
So, as we always do, we are going to refer to either B. Joe Trimble's Star Trek Compendium or Alan Asherman's Compendium. For this episode, we are going to consider what Alan Asherman had to say about Star Trek, this Star Trek episode. The Man Trap.
Written by George Clayton Johnson, director Mark Daniels, and it has a list of the principal characters. I just want to mention that one of the characters in here, it says M113 Monster. That's pretty cool. And that's, M113 was the name of the planet. I mean, instead of calling it the Salt Monster or something. Okay, getting to the plot. Stardate 1531.1. The Enterprise visits planet M113 to give archaeologists Robert and Nancy Crater supplies and medical checkups. Years ago, Nancy was romantically involved with Dr. Leonard McCoy, whom she nicknamed Plum. Now she is literally a different woman. Each member of the landing party sees Nancy differently because the real Nancy is dead, killed by a shape-changing alien which has assumed her identity. The creature, the last surviving native of this planet, has been enjoying a symbiotic relationship with Professor Crater. Crater supplies the salt that sustains the entity, and the creature provides Crater with companionship. The arrival of the Enterprise party upsets the delicate balance of this strange alliance. Craving additional salt, the creature kills 2 crewmen and boards the Enterprise disguised as one of its victims. The creature assumes Dr. McCoy's appearance and identity before Kirk eventually tracks it down and kills it with the aid of Spock and the real McCoy.
Now, we watched this episode with our local Tennessee Star Trek fans, the club that we have in the area, and some have offered their viewpoint of the show. So let's listen to what they had to say.
My name is Jonathan. It was interesting. This is the first episode of the whole series that was aired. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely dated, right? I liked how they used some humor in it. Was it the most fascinating story? Probably not. Out of all the different episodes, but I'm sure it was pretty instrumental for the time. So that's what I've got.
Jim Hawkins. I enjoyed it. I'd never seen it. I've seen some episodes I thought a little similar, but this one was good as the creature changed shapes, and I really enjoyed the buffalo or monster at the end. That was cool. Hairy monkey or something.
I'm Dennis. That was great. I've seen this one a bunch of times. I've seen them all a bunch of times. This is the first time in years probably that I actually watched an episode of Star Trek all the way from the beginning to end. I usually kind of stumble across it in the middle somewhere and watch part of it. Although we do actually at home have the entire series, but it's on videotape. And that's hard to play these days. I'm not even sure if we have a videotape player anymore. But I thought it was great. I thought it was really cool that this is the first one. But it was pretty fully formed. Like, a lot of it was really in place. I noticed a bunch of discrepancies, like Spock wasn't as strong as he is later, and some of the effects, obviously, the phaser effects have changed, and the gender stereotyping was a lot more prevalent than I think it became later. And so I think they kind of fine-tuned it, obviously, as they went on. But a lot of it was really there, and it was really kind of cool to see that.
My name is Derek. I haven't watched this in a long time, but I really liked it. The first crewman to get killed on the planet at the beginning, his name was Michael Zaslow, and he was a big star on the soap opera Guiding Light in the 70s through the 90s, and he passed away in 1998 of Lou Gehrig's disease. And I looked up, Nancy and her husband have also passed away, as has Spock and McCoy, so just 53 years later after this episode aired, it's kind of sad to think of all the people that we've lost. But Kirk and Uhura and George Takei are still with us, which is great. But I don't remember seeing Sulu's interest in botany before. Maybe they cut that part out and what aired on TV. So that was kind of interesting, but I don't remember it coming up in other episodes, or I've just blocked it out. But really enjoyed it.
Thank you. My name is Gia. I just watched this, so I was just noticing a few different things, like the warp one, which they've come a long way since then. And yeah, the bonding thing, that's a good point. I didn't think about that, but.
I'm Kavora, and it was a good episode. This one, I like the interaction with the crew, the way they showed how everybody was friends, and most of them, knew each other. So it was real easy for Uhura to see someone that she didn't know. And I noticed, like, this one didn't have Scotty, but it had everyone else, and it had, because Chekhov hadn't been added yet. So it had all of that with the crew, and it had the action. So it was very good.
I think it was a fun episode. It would be considered a Monster of the Week episode. Star Trek Within Time would go back and forth with having those Monster of the Week episodes. But you could tell this is the Twilight Zone writer, because it was that format of drama, 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 mystery, mystery, and then last 3 minutes, it twists of something that you weren't expecting. And in this case, it was a shapeshifter was not a human. It was actually a creature. So I thought it was excellent, stands the test of time. So let's throw out this question to the group. This creature is, we could say, a sentient being. Should the creature have been killed?
Yeah, my name's Derek, and I would say the creature should not have been killed. All they asked for at the very beginning of the episode was salt. That's all they wanted. They wanted to be left alone. And then once they realized that's what the creature needed to live, maybe it sounded like once it was fed, that it was a peaceful creature. And for them to basically kill it at the end, I was just thinking, how do we feel about that? And I'm not sure that was the right thing for McCoy to do. If you else would comment?
I would also say, though, it was out of resources and the last of its kind, so it would have suffered. I don't know. Right? Died off. Anyways, just another point of view.
But being the last of its kind, it makes, and they were aware of that. So you might say, I think they were taking the side of self-defense because they were the creature is unstoppable. But really, they couldn't do anything. There's no one in security that could have stopped it. And then Kirk was wondering about it later on, saying, the buffalo. He started thinking about it. Am I responsible for killing the last of this creature? So maybe his conscience was affecting him, that he made a poor decision.
In March of 2023, when you all show The Devil in the Dark, we can have this conversation again. Because if you've seen that episode, in The Devil in the Dark, the last of its kind, it's killing about 50 to 100 people, but Spock does not want to kill it. And he's the one that says no. He brings Captain Kirk around that they end up trying to save it.
That's exactly what I thought of when they said the last of its kind. The Porto was also the last.
I just wanted to add on to that I guess they must have fine-tuned their morality by that point, like the viewpoint that they wanted to have on the show. It seems like it wasn't really fully formed by this point, and by the Horde it was coming along.
Well, I want to say, so in the end, they had to kill it out of self-defense, but you all right, like maybe if they had given it salt sooner, they wouldn't have had to kill it. But the thing I remember is watching Professor Crater in this episode, and how he loved the creature, but then in the end, it killed him. I mean, I thought she loved him, but then she wound up killing him, and that just didn't seem right. That almost makes you think, well, maybe it really is dangerous if it could turn on someone that loved it and took care of it for so long.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Yeah, watching the episode again, I had forgotten that part. Like, yeah, she was his lover,
I guess the truth, Sarah, scared her. when I guess she killed it because she did not want him to get the truth serum. Then he would instantly point her out. Mm-hmm. So that made, but again, though you're right though, that was a pretty harsh act.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what she was going to do. When it was disguised as McCoy and they were going to give Crater the truth serum. Yeah, I was wondering how he's going to get out of that, but he did it by attacking Spock, which made sense. But then since he couldn't really feed off Spock, then it went after Crater.
I guess the lesson of this episode is the morals of a salt monster are inscrutable.
So let's talk about a few because we're celebrating tonight 53 years of Star Trek. This aired September 8th, 1966, and we're watching it 53 years later. Now, you, Dennis, you did watch Star Trek early on in the 60s. You're the only one amongst us that were part of that class of 66 crew. So, what do you think the general population, we'll start with you, felt when they saw this episode airing for the first time?
It's a good question. I don't know. This aired on my 6th birthday, so I wasn't really keyed into sort of the social zeitgeist where I grew up at that time, but this must have been really shocking. I mean, from what I've read about it, the mixed gender and the mixed races all working together and was a really kind of shocking thing in those days. And as you were saying before, the adult storyline with the science fiction genre was unprecedented. So I can see why it only lasted 3 years. I think it was probably hard for it to get traction with the general public. So I think I don't think it made a big splash, with the general public in its initial run. It didn't draw a lot of attention to itself except a whole bunch of nuts like us who really saw the value in it and just kept crying for more. And finally I guess the real value of it was started to be seen by others. And now, it's a worldwide phenomenon, but I guess that would be my thought.
What's the thoughts of the producers airing these out of order? Was putting this episode for the network, airing this one first, so no one saw the original episodes before, Corbomite Maneuver and Enemy Within. Do you think this is a good introductory episode for the general public to Star Trek?
Yeah, this was probably not a good representation of what the show turned out to be later. I think it didn't really have the same morals. It wasn't as much of a thinking episode, right? Even though it had some, but it was, this one had more violence.
I know one of Roddenberry's goals, I think, my understanding is that each one of these was really going to be a morality play. And it was going to have a lesson. And that doesn't show up too much in this. I mean, they kind of try to get at it with the bison thing, but it's not really a fully formed moral teaching. So it doesn't really fit with like the kind of pattern that I think started to happen maybe later in the series.
So which episodes were filmed or produced first?
So the first episode that was the pilot episode was The Cage, and then there was a second pilot was Where No Man Has Gone Before, and then Corbomite Maneuver, and then Enemy Within. Mudge Women, and then Enemy Within. So this is further down the line.
And they aired this one first.
Yes. So it looks like they aired this first just because they wanted to get the general science fiction of what people were used to at that time of science fiction.
Science fiction having monsters.
Monsters in action, that's it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Didn't Next Generation, didn't Star Trek The Next Generation go with the Nick and Now as the very first episode that was aired?
Second.
It was the second, okay.
Yeah.
Because George Takei was like, he said he called up James Doohan after he watched it, and it's like, what the hell is this? Is this the best they can do? You know, he was not thrilled with it. But then he said, I saw him at DragonCon in 2003, is where he said this. But then after a couple of years, he was like, hey, this is our show. You know, look at what our work has led to, and how it's evolving and stuff. So he totally changed his mind as it got a little bit more complex. And I'm looking forward to I hope I can come the month that y'all show Conscience of the King. That's where I think it was Lothos kills. He's like in charge of a planet and kills half the population because there's a food shortage, trying to save the other half. But he doesn't think a rescue ship is going to come in time, but it does, and the whole population could have been saved. And then it's like people are trying to hunt him down 20 years later. You know, I think that could be a good one to discuss, too. I was just thinking of other, as you say, kind of morally complex episodes.
Yeah. There's others later on.
Because leaders make tough decisions, and, you know, you can second-guess them later about the time, you know. Anyway,
Yeah, actually, Greg Cox did an excellent follow-up novel to that one, The Conscience of the King, which takes place, I think, something like 20 years afterwards. But I don't think there are any follow-ups to this. Nothing in the animated, nothing in novels. This is a strict beginning, middle, and end episode. You can self-contained on every level. But what do we think happens afterwards on this planet? I mean...
Oh, nothing.
Nothing, right?
Left, right?
That's it.
Maybe they'll send more people there. Maybe they'll send more people there to do the mining. I think they were miners, right? But because there's no one else left on the planet. So if there's still any need for it, then the Federation will send more people there.
Okay. Baby doll, when you first saw the man trap, do you remember any outstanding feelings about it?
I really just thought the creature looked pretty raggedy, and even as a child, I didn't think it was that scary.
Mm-hmm. I liked the episode in the rewatch. I still enjoyed it. We said that it's not a typical Star Trek episode in many ways, but we all had to agree that it did make sense, even though the early episodes were aired out of order, that it's a great introduction to Star Trek for the average person at that time.
It was more of what people think science fiction is, because it had a monster. I mean, that's just what people were expecting from science fiction. But I was reading about it in the book, These Are the Voyages, that talked about all the episodes. And the writer said that this episode is about loneliness, which I get. I mean, I had just not thought of that, but about Dr. Crater being lonely. His wife died, and well, of course, it was the creature that killed his wife. But then you look at the creature, the last of its kind. So we'll say it was lonely too. And these two people found each other and were together for several years.
And we have to mention the writer, because the writer is one of note, George Clayton Johnson.
He had been known as being a Twilight Zone writer. He wrote several episodes for Twilight Zone.
And Gene Roddenberry wanted quality writers for the show. That was one of the things that marked Star Trek very different than contemporary, what they called Monster of the Week science fiction. But he was able to find that happy medium to occasionally have a Monster of the Week, but then have issues brought up like that, the issue of loneliness, to have a little bit of a twist ending where the creature transformed. Very much enjoyed this episode and the pacing of it.
It was good. And another thing about these, I mean, I think what was more typical of the first season was showing more of how the crew interacts. So having this scene with Janice Rand and Sulu in I guess it was the Arboretum with all the plants, and saying that Sulu was a botanist, or he had that hobby, which it was never mentioned again on the show.
Yes, and Grace Lee Whitney actually, when she would give talks about some of her favorite moments being on the set. She said that this scene of them on working with Sulu and his plants, that it was one of the most lighthearted times that she had on the set. She very much enjoyed that setting. They were telling crude jokes about Beauregard, a lot of off-color things. The puppeteer tried to reach for her skirt.
Oh, yeah, and you could tell, now that plant, Beauregard, you could tell it was just that there was a hand inside it that was moving it.
Mm-hmm. And Grace Lee Whitney said it was a fantastic episode to debut, even though it was the 6th one. So even the cast felt that it was an appropriate first episode for everyone to see.
Well, and another thing about the crew, this is where Uhura goes up to Spock and was saying, "Tell me what your planet is like when the moon is full."
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, I mean, which was a good scene, but this is what J.J. Abrams used to give him that's what gave him the idea that maybe Spock and Uhura had a relationship, and that's why he put that in his movies.
Oh, go figure.
Yes.
And the model that we see here, it's a full-size model that's very large. It's the one that we got a chance to see in Washington, D.C. at the Air and Space Museum.
Oh, the model of the Enterprise, the exterior.
Yes, that's where everyone saw it for the first time in this episode. It's massive, but it's only a one-sided view of the ship because there's wires and plugs on the other side.
Well, one thing about this, in the opening scene where she is, she's looking at crewman Darnell and he sees her as a blonde, and he looks at, she's looking at McCoy, he sees her one way and Kirk sees her one way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if all three of those men were standing there, I mean, especially when she was a blonde, don't you think Kirk and McCoy could see the back of her head and see that she was a blonde? Or did the back of her head look different when the front of her head was a blonde?
Now, see, I figured that it affected their mind, not their eyes.
Okay, you think
Does
they
that
really...
make sense?
Okay, yeah, she didn't really change her appearance.
Correct.
That's what you're thinking. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I always thought she changed her appearance, though, literally. No? Okay.
Well, I don't know. You can think whatever you want. I think they affected their mind just for the reason that you said. But Gene Roddenberry's show was so different from other shows of the time because he wanted to not just have people walking by, but actually have them doing things in the corridors. And if you really look for it, you're going to see that people are having functions along the ship. And then when Uhura asked a crewman to fix her door, it showed that everyday things were going on with the ship, that there was interactions with people, not just background clutter.
And most of the people knew each other. That's why it was so strange that Uhura saw that, like, the man that she didn't recognize, but because everybody kind of thinks they know everybody on the ship. Like Janice Rand walking into Green, and she says him by name, "Hey, Green,"
Yes. And it's funny that element of Uhura speaking Swahili, what the gentleman says to her translates to, "How are you, friend? I think of you, beautiful lady. You should never know loneliness."
Yeah, that was pretty neat, too. And it was Roddenberry's idea to have him speak Swahili.
Yes, it was wonderful that right from the beginning, people were seeing this was different. This was a truly international effort.
Star Trek Trivia. Question number 1. What is the name of the crewman Uhura asks to fix her door? Question number 2. What are the designations on McCoy's door plate?
And also, when Sulu thanks Rand for lunch, he says, "May the great bird of the galaxy bless your planet." That's because
Gene Roddenberry had been called the great bird of the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I read somewhere that Gene's the one who put that in the script, and it was sort of stroking his own ego doing that. But where have you heard the term great bird of the galaxy, have you only heard that in relation to Gene and Star Trek?
I have only heard that, yes.
I used to have a teacher in high school, and he used this expression, May the great bird of the galaxy fly up your nose. And I don't know where he got that.
That makes no sense.
I know.
What would you do if I just stuck my finger in your nose right now? Right now, what would you do?
No, you cannot do that. Stop it.
Now, the funny thing is, we see in this episode, Uhura is wearing what we know her always to wear, a red uniform. Because if you watch the airing episode, she starts out with the gold uniform, and then she switches to ship services. So viewers must have been confused for the first couple of months because she was going back and forth between red and gold.
Yeah, you just kind of think, well, I guess they can have spare uniforms. And we do know that the creature, you know, as the salt creature actually looked, was that was played by a woman actually.
Yeah, we met her before at a con, Sandy Gimple.
Yes.
She's in her 80s, and she's in fantastic shape to this day.
And there had been an idea that the monster in this would be a sexy woman instead of a monster. But they decided to change it for some reason. They just thought a creature would just look more interesting for the shows at the time.
Now we have to discuss the fact that it's been established here Vulcan has no moon. But when we watch Star Trek the Motion Picture, it looks to like there's a moon rotating around Vulcan. How do we explain that?
So you see the big round ball in the sky, and it has been explained by saying that it's actually another planet. So they say that Vulcan has a sister planet, and every once in a while the orbit of that other planet gets so close to Vulcan that it looks like it's a moon.
Makes sense. That's what I've been taught.
And I believe it was Anne Crispin that decided to name the planet in one of her books. She called it Tukut, and the planet Vulcan is called Tukusa because Vulcans wouldn't really call themselves Vulcans because that's an Earth name.
We're going to talk about the salt shakers. When the salt shakers were needed as props, Gene Roddenberry originally wanted something that was more futuristic. So the prop makers went out looking for futuristic salt shakers. But guess what? They all looked so futuristic that no one could even tell that they were salt shakers. So it was decided, just get some regular salt shakers then.
Yeah, they decided they would just use regular salt shakers so that you could tell what it is. And so the futuristic salt shakers became Dr. McCoy's medical instruments.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
And when we look at them as Dr. McCoy's medical instruments, you say, wow, those are far out. I'm glad that they made that switch because I would never guess what that is. And David Gerald is the one who named the creature the Salt Vampire. And so to this day, because there's really never a name for the creature, it's called the M113 creature, but even on the show, they don't call it that.
Yeah, that was another thing. I think when I was a child, at the end when Kirk said, I'm thinking about the buffalo, and I was kind of thinking that they named the creature the buffalo, even though they really just used it as a comparison in the episode.
And we have the Diamond Select MC doll, and what does the doll name it?
Salt Vampire.
There you go.
Now, where was it that David Gerald said that? In the world of Star Trek, or what?
I don't remember. I just remember him being credited coming up with that name, and fandom latched onto it.
Okay, makes sense. I think I've always called it the Salt Creature. Oh, and this one, so this doll doesn't really look like it either.
Oh, this doll, boy. It's the same size as all the other Mego dolls, and it has boxy features, more masculine features. It got released probably in 2011. Wow, was that late? 2011. And it got paired with the Captain Pike doll, which makes no sense because Captain Pike did not encounter the Salt Vampire.
So Mego didn't have a doll of this one?
No.
Okay. It almost has a Frankenstein head. That's what I'm looking at.
But the doll's fingers look fantastic, don't they?
Yeah, they got his hands right with the suction.
And this figure of the creature of the salt vampire, it has not really shown up in any other sorts of media, but oftentimes when we think of Star Trek creatures, this show up.
Well, it was killed in this one, so it couldn't reappear. I mean, unless they could come up with an explanation of how it could be in another novel.
We tried to think of all the different comics and novels where it would be, and the only thing that we noticed was the recent Q series by IDW, and the Q were able to build an army of salt vampires. Remember that?
Yeah, that was neat. Yeah, if it's something like that, something made up by the Q, then you could have it. Yeah. So, but wasn't the idea of using the suction really a good idea? And then showing the rings on people's faces to match the little suction cups on the creature's hands.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent. Showing where the contact points were.
Now having Nancy Crater as an old girlfriend of McCoy's, I think she's the only girlfriend mentioned. I mean, a past girlfriend mentioned in any canon. And it has been, like, it wasn't stated on the show, but we know that McCoy has a daughter named, what was her name?
Joanna.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think Nancy is Joanna's mother? They never said that.
They never said that, nah. Let's see. He said that he knew her, from 5 years ago? Some would say Joanna really? Was from another relationship. That's what I'm going to guess.
Okay. Star Trek Trivia. Question number 1. What is the name of the crewman Uhura asks to fix her door? The answer, Bobby. Question number 2. What are the designations on McCoy's door plate? Answer, 3, F as in Frank, 127.
All right, so let's talk about the adaptation of this in literary form. We had a name change for the title.
In the James Blish adaptation, he called it The Real McCoy. Or was it The Unreal McCoy? Wait. Yeah, The Unreal McCoy.
I think that's a good name. That works. I could have gone with either one, The Man Trap or The Unreal McCoy.
Yeah, I think The Unreal McCoy kind of fits this, because Man Trap, that title could have been used for some of the other episodes, too.
What's interesting is, as we know, these adaptions are based more on the scripts than they are the actual shows.
Well, I mean, like you said, some parts were left out, which happened in all of these adaptations, I think just because of not having enough space. So they left out the scene with Rand and Sulu talking. I mean, really, they left out some really good, that was about the good scenes.
It really was. Those are the character development scenes. Those are scenes that we think about now that add to the lore, the history of characters that we don't see too much of.
Yeah, so if you didn't watch the show and only read the books, you wouldn't know as much about the characters. You would just get a plot and that would be it.
And also, they changed the names from the books to the show.
Yeah, which was weird. So instead of Nancy and Professor Crater, their last name was Bierce. But it's so funny because the first paragraph of this story in the novelization actually it said something like there were craters on the planet. So, like, is that how the names got changed to Crater?
It's like they made a reference to it, but then changed it. It was odd.
Yeah, that was funny. And so what else were we saying about the differences?
Oh, the book mentioned also that there was suctions all over the people's body.
Instead of just the face, right?
Yes, so that would mean that the salt vampire would, touching all over the place, which doesn't really seem to make sense.
Well, it just could have meant that the ring formations could have just appeared all over the body. But yeah, we think the rings just came from the suction from its
cups.
hands.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So that was kind of odd. but it didn't distract from the story at all. We were mainly looking for differences with the story development, and unfortunately for this adaptation, the things that they removed were all the side character developments. So it's one of the ones that we gain much more information from watching the show. Oh, that was a great episode to watch. I enjoyed reading it, the novelization of it, and viewing the episode with you, baby doll.
I enjoyed it too. And discussing it with our group after we watched it, that was fun too. They brought up some good points.
How many times have we said this? Star Trek is best when it's discussed with friends. That's what makes it such a unique show.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our Facebook group. Live long, and may the Force be with you. Nanu Nanu.